Saltify and Sapience Institute present The Double Standard Media Reactions to Zionist Terror by Jody Mcyntyre and Mohammad Hijab. Narrated by Ahmed Alauddin. Supervised by Sadiq Zaman. Conclusions. Standing at the edge of one of the craters in the wake of the attack, Abdul Karim Rayyan, a resident of the camp, held a paper listing the names of the 15 family members that he said he lost. They were innocent, just staying in the camp. What wrong did they do? He said. On November 16th, 2023, Airwars, a UK-based transparency watchdog affiliated with the Department of Media and Communications at Goldsmiths University in London, conducted a meticulous investigation into the true civilian toll of the October 31st Israeli assault on the Jabalia Refugee Camp. By collating 106 individual sources, largely comprised of specific eyewitness accounts posted onto social media accounts, Airwars estimated 126 to 136 civilian deaths, including 69 children and 280 civilian injuries. In the case of the Rayyan family, they identified and recorded each of the names of his family. The Airwars estimate is far higher than the figure of 50 provided by the Ministry of Health in Gaza and the IDF, although the Indonesian hospital had told BBC News on October 31st that they had received 400 casualties, including 120 dead. Founded in 2014, Airwars noted that the massacre was the most named victims we have ever monitored in a single event, and that almost every named victim we found died along with at least one other family member. The Airwars report is far more rigorous and specific in identifying the victims of the attack than any of the media we have analysed. When we compare the brutal civilian toll with the singular named Hamas commander and dozens of additional terrorists the Israeli military claimed to have killed, the IDF's acceptance of civilian deaths becomes unacceptable. Satellite imagery from after the pounding of Jabalia on October 31st displayed at least 5 large craters, including 2 approximately 40 feet wide, consistent with the impact of 2,000-pound joint direct attack munitions. The attack destroyed not just one residential apartment building, but a whole block. According to one analysis of the Jabalia attack, the IDF appears to have accepted a level of expected civilian casualties that was not just larger, but several times larger than that used by the US and the UK in any of the operations during the war against ISIS and other counter-terrorism campaigns. Why then has the October 31st bombing of Jabalia not been reported as an act of terror? As we have detailed in earlier sections, the Israeli establishment had a focus on damage and not on accuracy in Gaza, and saw no such thing as uninvolved civilians. October 31st was one of many criminal outcomes of this genocidal intent. Across the British, Arab, and Jewish media, there was not one characterization of the Jabalia massacre as a terrorist attack. Indeed, we have come to accept in the West that the Israeli military are automatically absolved of such appellations. However, in the author's estimation, there is no intrinsic reason for this to be the case. In 1946, when the Irgun bombed the King David Hotel on the instructions of the Haganah, predecessors to the IDF, the act was described in the British media as insensate fanaticism carried out by terrorists, by the US president as the wanton slaying of human beings, and in the Jewish media as a destructive and criminal act. Why are the violent acts carried out by the Israeli military today not condemned to the same extent? Let us apply the conditions of the UN definition of terrorism cited at the beginning of this text to the Jabalia massacre. Firstly, was it an action that was intended to cause death or serious bodily harm to civilians or non-combatants? In the case of the 2023 assault on Gaza, we have a wealth of information to draw on when determining the overall intent of the Israeli regime. On October 13th, Israeli President Isaac Herzog said, in reference to the Palestinians. It is an entire nation out there that is responsible. On November 1st, Knesset member and former public diplomacy minister Galit Distel Atbarian proposed erasing all of Gaza from the face of the earth. Another Israeli politician, Tali Gottlieb, called for a doomsday kiss, widely understood as a nuclear threat, and demanded shooting powerful missiles without limit, not flattening a neighborhood, crushing and flattening Gaza. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant vowed to eliminate everything there. In terms of the 31st October bombing of the Jabalia Refugee Camp specifically, IDF spokesperson Richard Hech claimed that the target of the operation was a senior commander, but acknowledged that the IDF knew that civilians were present. The latter is a gross understatement. As a report in Lawfare explains, any collateral damage estimation in advance of the Jabalia airstrike would have included the following basic information. The United Nations had over 110,000 refugees registered in Jabalia, over an area of 1.4 square kilometers. Despite Israel's warnings to the Gaza population to move to the south, a significant proportion of the civilian population in Jabalia remained in place. Other recent Israeli attacks on Jabalia had caused numerous civilian casualties. Lawfare concludes that this information must have resulted in a very high estimate for civilian casualties. Given the location, population spread, and choice of weapons, the actual toll of hundreds of civilians killed or wounded would have been a reasonable expectation. The evidence above makes it impossible to contend that the Israeli military did not deliberately target civilians in Jabalia on October 31st. By creating a narrative where every person and location in the Gaza Strip is a legitimate military target, as reflected in media reports that characterize Jabalia as a military stronghold, and the victims of the bombing as 50 terrorists. The Israeli political entity has managed to avoid culpability for these crimes in recent years. Nevertheless, unsubstantiated political statements do not outweigh swathes of eyewitness accounts and verified facts, as compiled, for example, in the Air Wars investigation. Secondly, was the purpose of such an act, by its nature or context, to intimidate a population or to compel a government or an international organization to do or to abstain from doing any act. In this instance, we have a wealth of Israeli public pronouncements to draw upon relating to Hamas, the governmental authority in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu claimed that the Israeli military's operations in Gaza was designed to put pressure on Hamas. Former Israeli Minister of Justice Gideon Sa'ar said on October 14th that Gaza must be smaller at the end of the war. And Nissim Vaturi, the deputy speaker of the Israeli parliament, said, "Don't allow fuel in. Don't allow water until the hostages are returned back." As Philippe Lazzarini, Commissioner General of UNRWA, concluded, the heavy civilian death toll in Gaza cannot be collateral damage, stating that the Palestinian people were being subjected to collective punishment. As we mentioned earlier, the symbol of the 2023 Israeli assault on Gaza has been the deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure. Unproven Israeli claims of targeting individual Hamas combatants, as in the case of the Jabalia massacre, does not absolve the aggressor from the wanton destruction of hospitals, schools, and bakeries. These attacks both terrorize and intimidate the civilian population of Gaza, and as senior Israeli figures confirm, are designed to compel the Palestinian authorities to cede to Israeli demands. Both elements of the 2004 United Nations definition of terrorism were present in the Israeli bombing of the Jabalia Refugee Camp on October 31st, 2023. An act of terror is neither defined by the identities of its victims or perpetrators. The lives of the 91 Arab, British, and Jewish victims of the King David Hotel bombing in 1946 were no more sacred than those of the 126 plus Palestinian victims of the Jabalia massacre in 2023. And the Jewish militants of the Irgun and Haganah in 1946 were no more criminal than the Jewish militants of the IDF in 2023. A moral consistency is imperative. Therefore, just as the King David Hotel bombing was condemned as a criminal act, so too should the Jabalia massacre. The Jabalia Refugee Camp bombing was unequivocally a terrorist act. May Allah have mercy on the oppressed. We hope you have enjoyed this certified production of The Double Standard, Media Reactions to Zionist Terror, published by Sapience Institute, written by Jody Mcyntyre and Mohammad Hijab, narrated by Ahmed Alauddin, and supervised by Sadiq Zaman. The end.